Hey, this is Kevin. As promised, I'm going to be presenting my Athenian Army from about 500 BC to 300. It's one of my favorite, probably because I had to paint the shields. And if anybody has ever had to paint hoplite shields, they know what I'm talking about. I did this by hand, and it was difficult and grueling. The figures are from Zeiston, and I think there's a couple of Old Glories mixed in here. I love the two companies. I did this army many, many years ago, but everybody knows Athens because the city still exists today. And it was the let's say, the mother of democracy. It has such an impact on our world today, and that's why it resounds with most. The figures are probably the most stunning, very colorful, different than the Spartans, different than the Thebans. Lots of different shields, as you can see how I've done that. In hindsight, I probably should have had a lot more with the mechanical owl, that's what I call it, on the shield. But I just took as you can see from the figures I'm presenting, just different shield patterns that I liked: faces and octopus and eagles and horse heads, different things, just to give it some color. And I just thought my Athenian army should be very, very colorful. Those right there that you saw with the Pegasus shield, those are my attempt at Argos, who was actually not so friendly to Athens, but what the heck, I just put him in there. But the Athenian army was a lot of fun to paint. It's really beautiful on the table, and of course it is the antagonist to Sparta and to Thebes, and so it kind of rounds out this particular collection. You can use these in a lot of different armies. You can throw these in with the Persians. You can use these fighting alongside Sparta, like at the Battle of Plataea. But the Athenian army was most known for its battle that it had with Persia at the Battle of Marathon. You know, Athens was not a typical Greek city-state. It was the most powerful. It was at the center, was named after the goddess Athena. After its war with Persia, it expanded dramatically throughout the Aegean Sea. As you can see, all the yellow are allies, or at least forced to be allies. They were a formidable force, very, very rich. And it concerned the Spartans, and that's actually what threw them into conflict with Sparta, causing the Peloponnesian War, which is famous. Most of my readings of understanding about the Athenians, the Greeks, the Spartans, the Peloponnesian Wars, the wars with Persia, was by reading two very wonderful books by Herodotus and Xenophon and Thucydides. All of those really help you to understand the world of the Greeks. But Athens was famous. I mean, it beat the Persians by themselves at the field at Marathon. And you can tell by this Greek timeline just kind of put together, that they were between, 750 and 146 BC when the Romans finally conquered them. But Athens, really's heyday is between about 490 and 404. That's a wonderful time of history. It's one I really love, and you just really have to enjoy a Greek hoplite and the intrigue that happened between Sparta, Athens, the city of Syracuse, Thebes, Macedonia, the Persian. I mean, it really makes for a very, very good read and is very applicable to the United States today and other nations and how they're dealing with their politics. But I think if you're going to build an Athenian army, I think there's a lot of manufacturers out there that have beautiful figures. And I would say feel free, as I have, to use as many colors as you want. They shield designs, you could have them from being any one of their city-states. You could easily bring in Euboea, milites. You could bring in figures or paint figures from the eastern side of the Aegean, Halicarnassus, Sardis, and the rest. But I think it's fascinating to try your hand at painting shields, and if not, there's some great transfers that you can buy. I actually do have a couple of transfers in there, I have to admit. I wanted to try it. I found it easier to do freehand. But, Athens with Sparta was thrown into this conflict with Persia. Most people know the movie of 300 when the Spartans kicked the Persian envoy down the well, but actually Athens started that. Herodotus said that the Athenians defiantly shoved their envoy from Persia down into a chasm. The Spartans followed suit by throwing the messenger down the well to collect earth and water. It sparked the wars with Persia, which then sparked ultimately the Peloponnesian War. Fascinating piece of history. But the Athenian army was organized into 10 different tribes, and each one of those tribes had 3 sub-tribes, and so each one of those was to supply 900 hoplites each. So the Athenian army was about 9,000 to 10,000 strong. And what's interesting is the Athenians kind of drew their hoplite citizens or hoplite soldiers from the citizenry from 3 regions of Attica, really the inland, the town, and the shore. And Cleisthenes, the man responsible for doing that and supporting the democratic system, really was the impetus behind it. I would urge you to look at building an army of Athens and Sparta. I think it's terribly enjoyable. And I think that if you're going to build one, you need to probably have about 75% of the army needs to be infantry. And 50% of that or more, up to 70%, should be hoplites. Cavalry is not so much. I actually built a little bit more than I should have, but you can have up to about 25% of the army be cavalry, but realistically it's probably more like about 10%. Cavalry was not a big part of a hoplite later Greek army. And skirmishers, the Athenians had more than the Spartans, so feel free to add more peltasts, Cretan archers, slingers, and the best thing about when you have an army like this, you can really morph it into other ones. And it's just colorful, it's exciting, you can use different tactics. But I wanted to showcase my army. I hope that you enjoyed it. I didn't mean to go into a lot of history. I think I could talk probably about 5 or 6 more hours, but I shan't do that. Thank you all for joining. My name is Kevin, and I'm really enjoying this community and putting out there what I do and what I love. Next up are going to be, I think, World War II for you enthusiasts.